Thank you, everyone. Yes, I feel like a little bit of an intruder because I'm coming from the East Coast. I work at a branding and design firm that's 80 years old. And the main experience I'll actually be drawing from is my time at a dog food company rather than a software company. So a little random, but hopefully you find some insight and some relevant takeaways from some of what I share. So on the left, Maya's already introduced my background and where I've worked. I had a little thing planned on the right where I was going to kind of walk you through my life through the lens of 4 brands that are very important to me. I don't want to spend a ton of time doing that. It wasn't that deep. I love Wendy's. I have fondness and nostalgia for it. But I do recommend that as an icebreaker, especially breakfast cereal. If you ask people to introduce themselves via their favorite breakfast cereal, it's actually quite a revealing and insightful icebreaker exercise. So by now you can probably sense that I'm passionate about brands. I've devoted my career to building and understanding them. And when I kind of step back to think about that, it's kind of a weird thing to devote your life and career to because brands don't exist. They're literally sort of series of associations in people's minds. They, of course, have physical manifestations, but by definition, they're not real. And so it's kind of deranged that myself and many of us devote each of our days to figuring out how to work with and build something that's not really real. But that's what I love about it, that it is this kind of thorny and whole-brained exercise that takes that kind of mindset. And a really famous strategic planner, Jeremy Bullmore, had this quote about them. Brands are fiendishly complicated, elusive, slippery, half-real, half-virtual things. When CEOs try to think about brands, their brains hurt. And I think it's that slipperiness that has always drawn me to them. And it's also, I think, why we tend to compartmentalize aspects of brand and marketing and often kind of pit things against each other and say this thing's dead, this is the new thing, now this thing's dead, this is the new thing. When in reality, I think all of us know that all of these things matter. They're all kind of false choices. We need to be doing it all and thinking about it all. And the magic lies in figuring out when you focus on one or the other and in what proportion and to what degree. And so that is the ethos behind the title of my talk, Yes, Brand, where your brand is your essence as a company and should be that connective tissue and that glue that holds things together. And even when you are doing performance or growth marketing, you're still thinking about it through the lens of how your brand uniquely does that and really filtering and prioritizing it for the right messages and the right moments. Yes, brand is, of course, also a play on yes and, which is a sort of common improv comedy tenet. It's this idea of not questioning the reality of what's happening in the improv skit. You accept it, that's the yes, and then you build on it, you move it forward, and that's the and. And I wanted to pay homage to the San Francisco School of Improv while I'm here. And there's this improv troupe called The Committee that was founded here in the 60s. It was an offshoot of the Second City improv troupe from Chicago. And they were sort of I really nerded out on them and went super deep. And they were sort of my inspiration for some of the principles that I'll walk you through. In particular, they developed this improv technique called the Herald, like a man's name, Harold. Sort of random. I don't think there was any kind of intent or meaning behind the name, but it has a very specific structure. It's a group improv exercise. You get a random prompt from the audience. Let's say someone yells out like potato or something. It's then the job of the improv troupe to come up with 3 different vignettes based off of that word. They create kind of 3 mini worlds, and there are 3 scenes in each of the 3 mini worlds, and then at the end, you're supposed to kind of mix the 3 scenes together so the very distinct characters in each meet each other in that final scene, and hopefully hilarity ensues. And so Scott earlier talked about the whole being greater than the sum of its parts, and that's very much true of the Herald Improv exercise, and it is very much true of brand building as well. So the first tenet of the Herald, or of improv generally, is to create a group mind. Improv is at its core a very selfless art. You have to put your own ego aside and really focus on propping up those around you, making your teammates look really, really good, and creating that kind of harmony and that unity between you and everyone else on stage. And that is not unlike what it takes to build a great brand team and a great brand generally. You, of course, have to start with great people, but then you also have to give them kind of the tools, the starting points, the boundaries to act as sort of a unified group mind. And that, from my experience, happens a lot through words and language, and articulating kind of who we are and what we stand for as a brand in a way that everyone understands and can then apply in their own way in their day-to-day roles. So at the Farmer's Dog, for instance, our mission was defined as turning unconditional love into uncomplicated care. Very, very precisely chosen language. Notice there's no mention of a particular species or even of a particular product. We really wanted to orient people around simplifying caring for their pet in everything that we said and did. The unconditional love part was also really important and governed our tone and our intent. We did a lot of kind of, not necessarily competitive attacks, but attacking the status quo of pet food and big kibble or big pet. And the unconditional love component of this was a reminder that we never wanted to be shaming the dog owner or the pet parent in our endeavors. Everyone was trying their best. We didn't want to make them feel bad or guilt them into buying our product. And so collectively, these two components really helped create that group mind for the team and for the company. We also had an external expression of that, which was Long Live Dogs. Our tagline, our rallying cry, whatever you want to call it. And this kind of furthered that group mind. We, even without asking, people made it their little LinkedIn bio. Our customers and just people out on the street would play it back to us. So again, showing how a few powerful words can start creating that unity both inside and outside the company. When you do this successfully, you also, again, put your own ego aside and you sort of transcend any one individual when it comes to bringing the brand to life. Some of you may have seen the Farmer's Dog Super Bowl ad a couple of years ago. I actually wasn't there for that, and part of that was painful, of course, that they finally decided to pull the trigger on Super Bowl budget after I left. But there's also something so incredibly rewarding about seeing people you hired and developed and brought onto the team take the brand, run with it in ways that you couldn't have even imagined, and bring it to life in a way that made you really, really proud. And that, to me, was sort of the group mind in action and at its best. By far my favorite moment, though, was, again, seeing that group mind come to life externally when someone saw one of our Long Live Dogs out-of-home ads in New York and voluntarily got it tattooed on their bodies. They weren't even a customer. I don't think they even had a dog at the time. But it resonated so much that they felt the need to have it permanently inked on, I believe that's a thigh. I still don't really know. So principle number 2 is listen and reciprocate. Good improv is a lot about making connections, especially in that Herald technique. You have to remember things that happened a while ago in the skit and draw from them and bring them back and repeat them. And so you have to be a really, really good listener. And the same is very much true of building a great brand, listening both internally and externally. At Ogilvy, I worked on Samsung, launching their first foldable smartphone. And so we did a lot of listening around how the organization was thinking about bringing it to life. And it kept coming back to Samsung's Korean heritage, which people were, on the one hand, very proud of, and it was really distinctive in the category, particularly relative to Apple, which they were obsessed with as a competitor. But they were also hesitant to lean too much into it because they wanted to be a global brand, and they were worried about leaning too much into it. And what we were able to do was actually listen externally, and at the time, Korea was really hot in terms of skincare, food, fashion, and so listening internally, listening externally, we were able to kind of make the case that they should lean into their Korean heritage for the launch of this sort of game-changing new category-creating device. I'm going to skip the video for time, but we essentially developed the campaign centered around, it was all in Korean, and it said "The future unfolds" for the foldable device, and also created kind of intrigue that we were using Korean type in sort of many, many markets around the world. One of my favorite places to listen is Reddit. It was a badge of honor for me to have one of our commercials in the Commercials I Hate Reddit. It was a pretty simple series of customer testimonials where one of our customers was talking about the impact of the food on his dog, and he talked about the fact that it led to high quality poops, which is a thing, and something, whether you're a parent of children or of pets, you pay attention to as an indicator of good health. And so we saw this and said, instead of shying away from it, we really leaned into it, and actually created a whole content program around high quality poops. We had a marquee article. We actually filed a petition to change the poop emoji to look more like a high quality poop. The actual poop emoji is quite a low quality soft poop. We sponsored poop bags in New York City parks, and for April Fool's Day, we developed a number 2 scented candle, which we were then able to actually connect back to a real product benefit, which is that poop is both higher quality and less smelly on the farmer's dog. So a great example of listening and reciprocating and running with it. Another principle, move the story forward. That is the heart of Yes and. Just keep the story moving. Keep saying, keep doing, don't overthink it. We talked a lot at the Farmer's Dog about pet food regulation and the fact that standards were pretty lax for what's allowed in pet food, and also for how it can be marketed. You can sort of portray really, really low quality ingredients as very, very high quality through imagery and language. And so instead of just talking about it, we said, hey, could we actually act on this? And we went to Albany first and then Washington to fight for legislation that would make calling your product food a higher standard than it currently was. And we got some great press out of it. The fight is still ongoing. It's not necessarily a top-of-mind issue for legislators, but a great example of how you can engage in sort of big, bold actions and behaviors to bring your mission to life and earn attention. However, that also happens in small ways. One principle I try to instill in my teams is that no moment is too small to be a brand moment. Camille talked earlier about consistency, and it's not necessarily about things being matchy-matchy and looking exactly the same, but every little moment matters, and you have to be intentional about it, and it should feel like it's coming from the same person or the same brand or the same voice. And that's really hard. You have to kind of be annoying to set that kind of standard and to get people thinking that way, but that's where sort of that group mind comes in, and you can make even a banner ad a lovely and magical experience if you put in the effort and the intention. Final principle, seek truth. If you speak to people who are really good at improv or do it a lot, they'll tell you their goal isn't actually to be funny or to make people laugh. It is to tell or expose the truth, to be honest about human nature or about what's happening in the scene. And sometimes that leads to a big laugh, sometimes it doesn't. But it's actually that truth-seeking that is at the core of the art form. And it should be for brand building as well. I think Scott touched on this. Also, really understanding who you are, the value of your product, and then finding creative and imaginative ways of telling that truth. At Lippincott, we just worked with this company called DigiKey that some of you may be familiar with. they make all sorts of little electronics and components for inventors and technology companies and innovators. And they did have this kind of charmingly analog, old school identity, but they were working with clients like Apple and SpaceX and were feeling that the way they were coming across wasn't fitting with the stature of their company and their business and their customers. And so we set out on a journey to maintain some of that charm and that affable quality of DigiKey, but modernizing it and cleaning up a bit. So I'm going to play a really short video to introduce the new DigiKey.
Some people are made different. The tinkerers, the solderers, the builders. The ones who can pick out their inductors from their resistors from their thyristors blindfolded, with one hand tied behind their back. What makes them tick, that different kind of fuel they run on, is that they're technical. And at DigiKey, we get technical. So well, in fact, we could draw you a schematic. Because the technical aren't just who we serve, but who we are. We get experts because we are experts. We know the ins and outs of our bytes and bolts, contacts, and housing, and how each piece in our inventory helps innovation click into place. We get engineers because we're engineers. We build industrial strength relationships not just with suppliers and customers, but between suppliers and customers. We get hard workers because we're hard workers, who know one delayed part can scuttle the whole idea. And let's face it, the future waits for no one. We get you because, well, we are you. We're technical, and we get technical. DigiKey.
So you could see we were inspired by the actual little components when developing the identity, and this "we get technical" line, going back to creating that group mind, has really become sort of an internal rallying cry and point of pride for everyone at DigiKey. I'm going to skip the final example. So I wanted to wrap up in the spirit of improv with a nod back to where we started, which is this San Francisco-based improv group, The Committee. This is them outside of the theater where they did all of their shows in the 60s and 70s. And I found in my digging through their archives the address, and I saw it, and I remember thinking it looked familiar once I knew where this conference was taking place. And as it turns out, it's actually 2 doors down from where we are at this very moment. It's obviously no longer a theater, but I don't know, I kind of got goosebumps when I made this connection. And it once again reminded me that improv is a great metaphor for brand building, but also for events and experiences like this, where we're all kind of coming together and co-creating the agenda. And so I'll leave you with this quote from one of the committee members. Improvisation says something so positive about the human spirit that a bunch of people can get together and by following a few simple traffic rules can create art and can entertain an audience and can thrill and exalt each other. So thank you, Maya, for bringing us all together to do just that. And thank you.